All right, it's 3 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Today's Wednesday, September 24th. This is our regular scheduled meeting of Hutchinson Utilities Commission. Agenda item number 1 is the conflicts of interest by any of the commissioners today. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, and that is to approve the consent agenda with the minutes and to ratify the payment of bills. Anybody have anything to pull out of there?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
My second.
Motion by Don, second by Tom. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Agenda item number 3 is to approve the financial statements.
Couple things to mention. You'll notice the customer revenue is down. A large chunk of that was for probably we went back 19 years on the spreadsheet, which I think is when the rate stabilization started, but we gave a credit to the customers this last time. It actually totaled $337,000. And a year ago, we charged them $185,000, so that's over a $500,000 difference right there. That has to do, we keep generating pretty much every month. You'll notice the sales for resale is way high again. I think that's probably the 4th month in a row. Other than that, the gas was pretty similar. It was down a little bit. There were operating expenses that were a little higher due to paying some regulatory and legal expenses, and then reimbursed expenses to Fairfax and Heartland Corn. I think one of the expenses was drug and alcohol testing, and that was in a different month the year before. So that's all I have.
Just a couple other things. As Jared mentioned, so if you look at the swing on the power cost adjustment from year over year, last year through this time we had $556,000 worth of power cost adjustments through August. This year we've actually netted a credit of $185 to the customers, so it's a difference of $742,000 just in the swing on the customer revenue line. So you can see we're down $534,000, but that's really most of that. All of that plus some is related to the power cost adjustment. So if you would factor that in, our retail rates that we've been incrementally increasing over the last couple of years is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It doesn't play itself out on the financials right now because of how much of a swing we've had in the power cost adjustments. So, but we are tracking the way that we should be on the retail side. Couple other things of note on the electric side. So I looked through September 23rd of this month, and again we're tracking pretty well on market sales. It's probably not going to be as high as it has been the last couple of months, but through the 23rd of this month, we've had an additional $423,000 in market sales. So again, still a pretty good month for September, which typically you're not seeing a lot of significant market sales because we're starting to get into those shoulder months in the fall where it's a little bit cooler. In relation to the September month of this month, keep in mind our wholesale rate costs significantly dipped down now as well. So our summer rates and our winter rates are usually the highest cost from our wholesale supplier, MRES. So now this September, so when customers get their October bills, beginning of October, that will have the new wholesale rate as part of our costs. So to give you an indication, our wholesale rate for August this year is $60.17 a megawatt, and when we get into September, it drops down to $44.69. So you can see we'll start to see a lower overall power cost supply because mainly the wholesale supply of energy the rates are dipping down, and those are again on time of use rates. MREF started that a couple of years ago where they went to time of use rates. Doesn't have a major impact on us because we're buying 25 megawatts around the clock, whereas most of their other members are full requirements. So as their load goes up and down and fluctuates, MRS is buying the power in real time for them. We're getting it around the clock. So the time of use rates for us actually saved us about $55,000 if I recall on an annual basis because we get steady megawatt hours around the clock. But in relation to that, they have instituted those time of use rates, and so the fall will be down now for September, October, November, and then hitting December, January, February, the rates will kick back up the wholesale rates because that's when it's just more expensive power. And then, as Jared mentioned, on the gas side, you had some of the attorney fees. Some of that was related to We hired Peter Scanlon, the Washington DC attorney, us and all the other utilities to work through those natural gas prepaid contracts. He specializes in those things. We wanted to make sure that those are good agreements before we come in from the commission. So I'm anticipating that happening in October. We will have 2 power supply agreements, one for our supply, where we're feeding our retail customers in town, and then the other one for the large industrial load that's on the pipeline. So we'll have 2. So I wanted to make sure that those were sound documents and they were putting us in a good position. So we've been paying some of that in a cost-sharing effort with some of the other municipal utilities, which we typically don't have. So that's taking up some of that. And then just kind of touched on the rate stabilization funds. Again, they're both maxed out. So I'd anticipate giving some credits back again on both sides, which, as Jared mentioned, we haven't had a power cost credit on the electric side as far back as ever. So we're in a good position this year to give back money. So really between the electric side and the gas side, we're approaching, whatever, 185 and almost 900,000 in credits back, and we still have several months to go with giving money back to customers. So it's been a good year from that regard for the retail customers getting that back. So otherwise, things are trending pretty well as far as usage, and a lot of our financial ratios are tracking better than they were last year. A lot of it has to do with the market sales. Even with giving back money, we're still in a good position to maximize our assets. So hopefully we'll try the rest of that way through the end of the year, and we'll be in a better position than we were last year. So, and then we did add cash for the month as well. If you notice in the cash designation reports, we had another $275,000 in cash. So I'll be working through some cash flow modeling here in the next month, so how we're trending with these projects. So.
All right, sounds great, Jeremy. Thanks so much. Anybody have any follow-up questions there on the financial statements?
I make a motion to approve the financial statements.
I'll second.
Motion by Kathy, second by Troy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Financial statements are approved. Item number 4 is open forum. I don't see any new guests today, so we'll move on to number 5. Communication. We'll start with the city administrator.
Good afternoon, everyone. One big thing, apartment complex downtown went through all the final approvals earlier this month, and they're expected to start construction in October. So that's probably an 18-month build with that. And on top of that, I'm sure Jim will touch on that. I know the conditional use permit for the data center was approved. I've been working with Dave on these public buildings with solar, and then we've also got another 3 to 4 housing developments that are looking at potentially happening next year or two. So it's been busy from a development standpoint at the city. So.
Who are the developers that are doing the landing?
They're called GC Real Estate out of St. Cloud.
Oh.
It's kind of a St. Cloud Avon area.
Okay.
So
I was just curious. Thank you.
they've done similar developments in Litchfield, Annandale, kind of this south central part of the state. So.
All right, thanks, Matt. We'll go into divisions. You did?
Construction continues at Hutch South. The site is to grade, and they've got fencing going in, and they're starting to pour foundations, and the foundation work will continue for the next month or so. But things are starting to move now after the long delay with the weather. So that's it.
Nothing new for me this month.
Nothing for me this month either.
I got something. You'll be happy to hear that the river crossing project will never have to be talked about again. It is completed, actually. We got the billing for it. There was no override, so the projected billing we got was what we have to pay. So that's good. Yeah, everything went off very smoothly. We had pretty good weather. I do want to say thanks to all of the city people, the cops, the parks department, there were a lot of people involved in this that I never imagined. But yeah, I got to meet a lot of people, and it all went very smoothly. And also want to say thanks to the residents. I know we kind of were an eyesore there for a while when people were trying to cross the bridge, and there was maybe a few accidents that almost happened. And they were gawking at us working, but thanks to letting us get it done. But the grass has been planted, and hopefully a month or so, and we'll even know we were there. So.
How long did that project take?
About 3 weeks, so to speak. And it was, actual work was probably 2, but there was a lot of prepping and getting things ready and excavating and that kind of thing. So, but, yeah, very smooth. And yeah, DRS3, we removed that one. I kind of showed the pictures of what it looked like before and what it looks like now. It's a huge improvement. And, yeah, we're in the final stretch of construction season before it gets cold, so that's all I got to report.
I don't have anything
All right. Human Resources. Angie?
Jeremy and I met with our insurance broker on the PFML on rates. So he is going to be coming back to us with a few questions that we had on that, so we can hopefully finalize that. We are hoping to go with a private party instead of the state on that, but we'll know more hopefully in a couple of weeks on that. Also working on insurance rates for next year, trying to finalize that as well. Trying to work on the finalized percentage increase. So there will be an increase, but just trying to make sure that we have a good handle on what that percentage might be. And then we're having an open house. We haven't had our open house since 2019, so we are going to have that again this year. It will be October 7th from 4 to 7. But I'll coordinate with you guys too on the timing of when, if you would like to attend as well.
Yeah, we're gonna have
Set a
people,
date.
yep, and then we'll have to set a special meeting if more than a couple of you are gonna attend at a certain time, so I'm sure that's a public meeting.
Okay. That's it.
Or others, you have to go on rotations and get your hamburger.
Mm-hmm, yep. We'll sure line that up.
Every half hour.
Right.
Every half hour.
All right, thanks, Angie.
Yeah.
Legal, Mark?
Nothing today.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Jeremy.
Just a couple things, as I mentioned, the cash flow, I'll be working on that. Our transformer has gotten pushed back into February of next year now. I think it originally started off October and then moved to kind of December, and now it's into February. So some of the projections as far as the cash flow in 2025 are now going to be pushed into early 2026. So I'll kind of relook at that and see kind of where we're at in relation to our current cash balances and let you guys know where we think we might stand. You know, further stuff gets pushed back into 26, the easier it becomes and the shorter the dip potentially could be on the cash flow, especially with the last debt service payment. So I'll work through that here and get some information so you guys can take a look at that. And then just really working through the natural gas prepaid contracts. Like I mentioned, we have our MCE board meeting tomorrow to approve the resolution to go out and issue bonds. And so after that piece gets codified tomorrow, then all the participants in this prepaid deal will have to approve resolutions. Mark will have to create an attorney letter. And then we'll have two natural gas supply contracts that will need to be approved. So hopefully those will come to you guys in October if we can work through all the details and some of the clarification things. And we'll get that ready to go. And then they're anticipating something, they probably wouldn't go out to the market until November, December at the earliest. We've kind of had a little dip here through September and October where the markets just aren't conducive to issue tax exempt bonds right now and get that spread between taxable and tax exempt. So they're thinking hopefully November, December will look a little bit better. If it happens during that time, it sounds like now the gas supply delivery wouldn't happen until as soon as April of 2026. Now, we were originally scheduled to start flowing some of that prepaid gas this November, but because things have been sliding back, we wouldn't actually look to physically take delivery of cheaper gas until April at the earliest. So we've got some time to work through those agreements, but that's the main focus right now to get that stuff continually moving forward on our end. And then working through the budgets and CIP, we're going to be heavy into that here the next 2 months. So I can put together some preliminary budgets for you guys to take a look at here prior to the November meeting. And then just start to work through some of the new the contract with those guys. They did submit that to their attorney to review the original draft agreement that I had sent them, and so I'm just waiting for them to review that information and provide some tweaks or changes or some amendments that they'd like to see in the contract. So it seems like that's moving along, and I'll keep you guys updated as things move forward, how that goes. But obviously, we want to make sure that we're getting that agreement in place here sooner than later, since that contract expires in March of 2026. I think that's it. So those are kind of the things, just kind of looking through the last couple quarters here and where things are at.
On the transformer, is there any higher confidence level that we'll get delivery in February now, or is it still just kind of floating around?
They're getting delays from their suppliers, so that's why they can't finish, is they're getting delays on their end. So that the last communication we had was a few weeks ago, they just said February shipping, but we'll see.
Okay, so not high confidence level.
Yeah, it's not high or low. Just-
A lot of moving parts, hard to coordinate it all.
Yeah. Well, out of our hands, so
At least I think.
we
at
hope
this-
they're true.
Yeah, at this point, I think you guys have still built in on the schedule that it's,
Yeah.
nothing's been pushed back so significant that we're not seeing the fall of 2026 to have that project completed yet.
There's some slack in the schedule for this, and just in knowing that things are like this are gonna happen, so hasn't derailed the schedule yet.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Dan. Item 6, policies. Looks like we had 9 to review and 3 to approve, I assume, Angie?
Yes. So the 3 that are listed are in relation to the rate schedule that was approved back in 2023 by the commission and the city. I did make some printouts for you guys, because I know we have a couple of new commissioners that weren't part of that 2023. So you can just see that it was for a 3-year rate, or 3-year track, and this is the last year for that, but I just wanted to give you just a little bit of history. But this is the last year.
The other piece I'd say, just in relation to the rate schedules, is we do a cost of service study every 5 years, unless there's some major issues that happen in the community that warrants it sooner, which is what the board has said, every 5 years. That's a good time frame. So we did our last one starting kind of 2020, end of 2021, and went through summer of 2022. And so then we set kind of the rates starting in 2023. So we're scheduled to have our full cost of service in 2027. Is when we're looking to have that. So one conversation point just to think about is, at the time we went through the last cost of service study, the commission only wanted to do a 3-year rate adjustment and not do 5 years, or not do anything longer, and just really look at how the financial position of the Hutchinson Utilities is after the last rate increase. So as we roll into 2026 budget, keep that in mind as you look at the budget and the new last rate approved increases go into effect, to see how you guys feel about not only the 2026 budget, but then the 5-year forecast I give you. And if there's any questions or any concerns or any thoughts about, hey, do we still want to continually move, and have another rate adjustment in 26 and 27, keep that in the back of your mind. If you recall, from the last cost of service study, we were about 10% off our true cost of service delivery. But at that time, the board didn't want to immediately jump all the way up to cover the cost of service. They wanted to incrementally phase it in over a 6 to 9 year glide path. And so we've kind of in year 3. So those are some things I'll bring back in front of you here later towards the end of the year, to kind of just remember and think about what these 3 rate increases have done and how that positions us financially, but then also providing you some framework and context to really what the end goal was or thought was at that time. And so if you guys have thoughts or questions about that, feel free to let me know, and we'll bring that back through the budgeting process and have some conversation. But I just wanted to add some context for somebody that maybe weren't around during that time, or didn't review the customer study, or hadn't heard about really the kind of the goal of the customer service study. So,
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the policy changes for the security light rental and the rate schedules on the electric and natural gas sites.
Second.
Motion by Don, second by Kathy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Changes are approved. Item 7, we have no unfinished business. We'll move on to item 8, new business. 8A is to approve the amendment to Heartland Corn's firm transportation agreement. Jeremy?
thanks, Matt. So you do have I did put the full agreement in on both items A and B, just so you had it for context. But really what I'm asking you guys to approve is the amendment that's at the back of both of those agreements. So in this first one, I'm asking the commission to consider increasing their firm transportation contract by an additional 400 decatherms a day. So that would bring their overall firm capacity space that they're using to 12,700 decatherms from 12,000 to 300. The reason for that is they went online with their second turbine down there, and so they are consuming more gas down there. And so when I talked with their CEO down there, I wanted to make sure that our contracts are current with current operations. And so I said, even though it's minimal, we still want to make the amendments and make the adjustments so that's clear for the current board, current staff, future staff, of where these contracts are at. I did also let him know that if he's still looking to add firm space in the pipeline over the next couple of years, that he should keep the reservation agreement in place as well. Because if you let that lapse at the end of the year, then that frees up space that either we could consume or we could sell, or whatever the case may be. So he still thinks right now it's good, but they still have some anticipation of getting to that 15,000 decatherms. So he also wants to reserve that additional space, and that's in the next item. But for this one, I'm asking you guys to approve amending the firm transportation agreement to add 400 decatherms a day to the existing contract. And the fiscal impact on this one would be increasing it just over 29,000.
All right, any further questions on that?
Make a motion to approve amendment number 1.
Second.
Motion by Troy, second by Tom. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda item 8A is approved. 8B is to approve the amendment to Heartland Corn's reservation agreement.
So in this agreement, since we're moving 400 decatherms from the reservation to the transportation, we need to reduce this agreement down to 4,300 decatherms per day. So we would be reducing our revenue on that side 14,000. So the difference between the two contracts is you're getting 20 cents a decatherm in the firm transportation and 10 for just reserving the space. So the net impact between the two is 14,000-ish, 14,640. So just looking for the commission to approve reducing the reservation agreement down 400 and then also extending it an additional 2 years to allow them some additional time to modify their operations if we need to and still have the space available.
Sounds good.
I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 1 to the Heartland Corn Reservation Agreement.
Motion by Kathy,
I'll second.
second by Don. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda item 8B is approved. Item 8C is to approve the memorandum of agreement relative to PFM.
Currently, our union contract runs from January 2024 through December of 2026. And at that time, when we were meeting, we put a provision in there for the health and disability insurance, just to agree to a reopener, because we knew PFMLA was right around the corner, and we didn't know what all of those details were going to be at that time. So since that time, we had a provision in there to reopen. We have reopened it, and both parties have met and agreed upon doing a 50-50 split between the employee and the employer. And also, as you know, we still don't know that percentage, but at least we have that 50-50 split for employee-employer at this time. And it can also, employees may also utilize sick time to supplement to make themselves whole.
Or vacation if they're out
Or
of sick.
vacation,
If
yes,
they're out of
correct,
sick time.
sorry, yep, thank you. Mhm.
All right, thank you. Any further questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement relative to paid family medical leave.
I'll second.
Motion by Don, second by Troy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda item 8C is approved. Item 8D is to approve the large power customer tariff.
All
Jeremy.
right, the moment you guys have been waiting for. It's been a long time in the making here. I did send out hopefully a memo too that you guys had a chance to read a little bit of that too, summarizing really the 3 documents that are in the packet. The first one really is the most crucial one, because the power purchase agreement and the security agreement don't take place or won't be executed unless you guys create a new rate class for customers like this. So what's in front of you today is some general language related to setting a new power tariff for large power customers that have a lot of load. A couple of things really unique that we really need to make sure that we're differentiating between other retail customers is really kind of the profile of the customer. So that I tried laying them out in order of what I would call are the most critical components of creating this power tariff. First component really being that it has to have a minimum load factor of 90%, meaning that the load that they're consuming is consistent, that they're not ramping down, that it's going to be a firm load. In the PPA structure, if they fall below a 90% load factor for 1 month, we kind of give them a grace period in the current contract. But after that, anything that falls below 90, they're getting billed for 90% load factor. So that's a critical component that we don't have with any other retail customer. Most of our retail customers aren't anywhere near like 90% load factor because they're ramping down on weekends, or they're closing shops, or the case. Even with some of our large manufacturers, they're just not close to a 90% load factor. So first point is they have to be a consistent load and they have to run in order to get the types of rates that are conducive for large power customers of this nature. Item number 2 is it has to be an interruptible service. So with all of our other retail customers, they're firm customers. We don't interrupt them, and most customers don't want to be interrupted or be able to be curtailed or shut down, either at our discretion or the MISO's market. And so with customers like this, they have the ability to ramp down stuff and ramp up. So in order to get a different type of rate structure, they have to be interruptible, so that if MISO calls and says, hey, we need you guys to shed 10 megawatts or 20 megawatts of load, and there's no restrictions with the customer and MISO, these customers understand that they're going to be the first ones that are going to be interruptible. And as long as we give them some general notification, if we can, they're able to ramp down facilities safely and ramp back up. So interruptible is critical for a customer class like this. We typically don't do that for our retail customers because you're just not in the business of interrupting power. But customers with this type of profile are okay with that, and they have contingencies to allow for that to happen. Third bullet item is really entering into a power purchase agreement. So within this rate class, there will be negotiations that need to happen based on participation in the MISO market, how is capacity covered by this customer, who does the scheduling. In this particular case, they're looking to have their own CP node set up with the market that's separate from our HUC node. And so there's different provisions with a customer because of the complexity they have or because of how they're buying or purchasing power. With our retail customers, we're doing all that. So we're buying all the power, we're buying all the transmission, we're covering all the capacity requirements with the MISO market. And so all those costs, all that time is wrapped up in our retail rates based on our cost of service. With customers like this, a lot of these people want to be able to buy the power themselves as a pass-through through the utility, or they want to be able to get into load modifying resource programs with the market so that they can reduce their capacity costs, which then saves them money and it saves us having to purchase capacity. So they have the ability to do different things that most customers don't if you get into an arrangement like that. So getting into a power purchase agreement and specifying the responsibilities and arrangements of each customer that would fall in this class would be critical as well. And you could see the length of these power purchase agreements, how complicated and sophisticated you can get, but it's, again, making sure that we're covering our basis and we're providing service that's required to them. We're also asking for a minimum electrical load of at least a 5 megawatt load. So getting into these types of structures, they need to be a sizable load that has some consistent load there to do that. Item number 5 is within this type of rate class, we would anticipate that they would have some type of collateral. So they're going to have collateral in place or security, whether it's a bond, whether it's a letter of credit, whether it's a cash deposit to cover their cost of the firm energy that they're buying through the market, to cover their portion of their transmission charges, to cover the capacity charges as they move forward. Because again, these types of customers with large load that's condensed, we want to make sure that they're not being subsidized by other retail customers in town. So they're responsible for covering all their costs, and they're also going to put down collateral to make sure that when we do the billing to them, that we're not stuck not being able to pay those bills because of the timing of invoicing. So we're going to require people that have these types of, that are in this class, to have collateral or some deposit put down. And then the other one that we've started out with in this customer class, and some of this can be negotiated through the power purchase agreement, but these types of customers, we're ultimately going to want them to at least pay for their upfront infrastructure costs, because a lot of times this type of load, they're going to have specialized equipment. We may not have some of that in place. So we can either negotiate that based on what type of infrastructure is required. If it's minimal infrastructure, like what we're talking about in this one, we may want to negotiate something different. This happens in this case, we're asking them to pay for all the upfront infrastructure costs, even for the minimal amount. But when you start getting into larger loads, that could be 60, 80, 100, you may be talking about substations and other transmission assets that then you'd want to negotiate cost sharing or figure out how you want to pay for those without passing it on to the retail customer. So In this particular case, we are asking for all the upfront infrastructure costs to be paid by the customer. That is also something that's different from our normal retail customers. We pay all the infrastructure upfront, and then we charge it back over time through the retail rates. So these customers that fall in this class are going to be responsible for more upfront costs. They're going to be responsible for putting down collateral and deposits and securities to make sure that we're not getting stuck, with any payment obligation on their behalf. So those are kind of the large bullet points of the tariff that really separate them from the industrial class or from any other commercial classes, those types of constraints or contingencies that we're putting in place. So, any questions on the bullet points, any consideration or comments or thoughts on that?
What type of business or what would fit into that category? Just an example.
I'd say predominantly you're going to be the data centers, AI, artificial intelligence. We've talked, maybe you'd have some manufacturing, but they'd have to be running around the clock, 3 shifts, where they're never ramping down over holidays or things of that nature. But you're probably really more times than not, you're probably in the technology sectors where you're really going to be, because of the condensed footprint that they can be in a spot. There's large energy users of that. Doesn't necessarily mean that there couldn't be something, some technology down the road or something else that comes up from a manufacturer that is running 3 shifts or is doing something where they have a consistent load factor. So I wouldn't sit here today and tell you that something else couldn't be in that industry, and so you guys just need to make sure that you're comfortable with the framework of the new rate class to allow that. And again, it has to be 5 megawatts, so it would have to be a sizable load coming in to do that. I mean, you can certainly tweak policies over time. It's your guys' discretion to change rate classes if you want. But we tried giving you a good framework to really signal in on really differentiating a type of customer that can utilize this rate class versus just being a retail rate customer, because they are really different profiles. But I would say right now, Troy, I'd say it's those types of things, the technology related stuff.
Make a motion to approve large power customer tariff.
Second.
Motion by Troy, second by Kathy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Agenda item 8D is approved. 8E is to approve the power purchase agreement and credit and security agreement.
So I did also add in the memo, because the contract was long, and so I tried highlighting for the most part, but I'd say the main kind of points are of the agreement. There's a lot of other additional language in there, force majeure language and things that I would say more legal stuff, but I think as it's related to the power purchase agreement, some of the major kind of components of the power purchase agreement. One, Article 1.2, we're talking about a 5-year agreement to initially start. So that was one of the conversation points we had is, within our community, we didn't want someone just to come in and then leave right away. Like, we want long-term commitments. We want customers in the community that are going to be around for a while and then be active in the community and provide support. So this agreement is an initial 5-year agreement, and then it can be extended in increments of 5-year terms or other intervals that are agreed upon. Article 1.3 really talks about the commercial pricing node. Again, we're looking to have a separate node set up for them, so it's easier for us to identify all the energy that they're using, because we're going to get billed by MISO to that separate node, and we're going to be able to track things a lot cleaner if they're not combined into our node. And so that also helps them from a pricing standpoint, because they're looking to buy power off the real-time market. So we'll be setting up a pricing node. We're establishing that through the MISO market. So that's important. That is not something that we typically have done here. All of our retail customers are underneath HUC's node. This would be setting up a new node for that, because that size of load coming into town. Article 2.3 really talks about all the firm energy, and what we're going to be adding to that is a 5 mil adder onto that firm energy to cover our administrative costs on that. And I gave you some scenario kind of cost estimates of where that annual revenue will be. Keep in mind, at the very minimum, the 90% load factor is what we'll be billing, even if they use it or not. So that's, again, an important point, that if you're running at a 70% load factor, you're still getting billed at 90. So, it's in your best interest to keep your load factor up. Otherwise, you're getting charged for something that you're not using. So I gave you kind of just a general range of what that would look like. Articles 2.4 through 2.6 really talk about really the requirements of the customer related to all the MISO charges, because they're going to be a separate CP node will be set up. They're going to be using the real-time market to buy all their energy, so they're going to get energy. They're going to get billed weekly from MISO. We're going to get billed weekly from MISO for all the energy used at that CP node. But they're also going to, talks about how they're going to cover their capacity requirements, or have HUC cover their capacity requirements, and how we're going to pass that cost on if we're responsible for that. It talks about the miscellaneous fees. It also talks about establishing the credit and security agreement, which is collateral put in place on our end to make sure that they fulfill their obligations, either through making their payments or us unilaterally exercising our right to draw down on the security. Article 2.7 talks about really the regional transmission services. So there's 2 transmission charges that we get. We get our transmission charges from MISO when we buy power off the market, or we sell in the market. There's transmission charges with the regional market, and then also GRE in this regional zone here also has transmission charges that we pay. So that establishes that, hey, they're paying their portion of not only the MISO's transmission charges, but GRE's transmission charges based on whatever that peak day is for the month. It will allocate that out based on their load relative to our load as a percentage, and break that cost out and provide them that invoicing. Article 2.8 really talks about the infrastructure costs and how they're going to pay for infrastructure and what's agreed upon in the infrastructure costs. And Dave and Dan kind of worked through that and looked at what was going to cost for us to move infrastructure from our substation to them. So that was agreed upon in there, and talked about them paying the upfront cost for that when we order it and when we get to receive the equipment, and how that's going to flow. Article 2.9 establishes really that the adder will cover any RECs that we're required to pay for them on their behalf to meet the 2040 carbon-free standards, up to $2. If the REC prices go over $2, then we're going to get together and negotiate who covers the cost of those incremental cost increases, because one thing we don't want to do is erode our sales revenue by having to pay incremental costs for RECs. Currently, right now under state law, we're not required to cover any RECs for anything outside of the wholesale supply volume. But I think I've mentioned this to you in the past. The legislature knows about that, and eventually that portion that we're not being supplied by MRS will come underneath those REC requirements as well. So just wanted to make sure we had a provision there that sets us up to address that if REC costs start to go up significantly. Article 2.12 talks about the first right of refusal. So if any capacity is requested by another customer over 2 megawatts, this customer will have the first right of refusal, because more often than not, if we've got excess capacity that's available for sale, they're gonna want to add and expand onto their facility because they want to have a long-term investment here, and so they're not looking at making this investment in just for a short amount of time. If they've got the ability to grow, they want to make sure they have the opportunity to do that, and we can service that. Article 2.14 establishes that it's an interruptible load. Article 4 really talks about the credit security agreement that need to be put in place, and we are asking for 2 months worth of payments, because by the time we bill them for the month preceding, like we get billed, we're already 45 to 52 days out. And so we want to make sure we have 2 months worth of security, so that with the lag in invoicing them after we accumulate all the costs, that we have 2 months worth of security, so that the timing works out, that we don't get stuck if something happens or he defaults or whatever. So, and then Article 9.2 establishes it's up to a 20 megawatt load. The intention right now is, if this gets approved, we're anticipating by the time this building gets built out and it gets energized, they're probably looking at the later half of 2026. We think that coincides pretty well with when the substation will be kind of finalized, so we think we'll be able to serve the 20 megawatts right away. If the building gets up and it gets energized before the substation is final, the agreement is you get the 10 megawatts to start with, and as soon as the substation is finalized and the project ends, and then we can bring up to 20. So we'll work through those timing, and as we kind of know more about the equipment and lead times, if we think those things will mirror pretty well together, we can give them the 20 megawatts right away, we will. But at this point, we're thinking 10 to start, and we'll see kind of how the time frames play out. So those are kind of the large pieces of the power purchase agreement. There's a lot more detail in the contract other than that. And then the third document is the large power credit security agreement. Again, the highlights there is it establishes the form of security that we're gonna need. So this company has the option to either put a letter of credit in place, you can put a cash deposit down, or they can put a surety bond, whatever financial instrument that they wanna do. We also talk about some of the parameters of the institution that's providing the type of collateral that you're a creditworthy institution. We also talk about the agreement that we can unilaterally draw on, that it's not a mutual agreement. It's if you default on any of the provisions in the power purchase agreement and you haven't fulfilled your obligation and we're stuck pulling the bag on some costs that you didn't pay, we can draw down on it if you don't remedy the default situation in a timely manner. Because the amount of power that we're talking about, bills can add up really fast for a customer of this size with that type of load factor. And so we obviously want to make sure that we're not getting into that situation. And then I kind of gave you an estimated amount, although that security agreement is going to be in the $750,000 to $850,000 range as of right now. If this project gets energized later in 2026, we'll recalculate the 2-month kind of average on there, and he'll have to put that in place before we energize them. So that is going to change, but I want to give you a range of what we're talking about as far as the size of deposit. And then again, it establishes the duration minimum of 5 years to coincide with the 5-year power purchase agreement, and then obviously it talks about establishing default scenarios and remedies that HEC can take to remedy the default. So those are kind of the highlight provisions of that. And when Mark and I worked with Kayla Brennan, we wanted to make sure that that was a separate agreement from the power purchase agreement, so that they're two standalone agreements, even though they're connected by provisions and language. That's a standalone agreement that you have to suffice as well in order to get service from HEC. So those are the components that we work through. Really fast, high level. Questions, thoughts?
So obviously this is kind of a standard operating procedure for what they're seeing, and that this was odd for them or out of the ordinary?
It wasn't odd from them. This is a way more detailed contract, the PPA, than what I would say this customer's gotten into with some of the other places. So we've added some additional provisions. We kind of tightened up the security agreements a little bit differently. Some other vendors or companies use the collateral from Meisel's calculation. And we said, hey, we want to use a 2-month average. So there's some nuances to our agreement. But a lot of the provisions are fairly standard. The real time, the capacity, those types of things. I would say our contract's a little more robust because we've made some reiterations to it, and we brought Kayla in to kind of modify some things and talk through some things as an energy attorney. So I'd say this was a little bit more detailed. So we had to work through that a little bit more because there were some things in there that were, he had seen or thought, this seems to be like it's favoring one side versus the other, and so we worked through that. So.
Attorney stamp of approval?
Yeah. So we went through about, a dozen reiterations, probably, over.
I was thinking 800, but.
7 months, 8 months.
821.
Yeah. A lot of the big stuff was pretty agreeable. Then you start getting into nuances of collateral and processes and how is your capacity going to work, and if we have to do that, how are we going to handle that? So it's a lot of how are things going to play out in operation. But we wanted to make sure that we were both clear on both sides of how things are going to happen. Or if we run into something that neither of us thought was supposed to work that way, that we, how do we address that type of thing?
So it's amendable.
Well, it's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seems like you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's.
First one's always the hardest, right?
It is the hardest, yeah.
Not true.
It's a good contract though, so.
Yeah.
We'll make a motion to approve the power purchase agreement, credit, and security agreement.
I'll second.
Motion by Troy and second by Tom. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Agenda item 8E, the power purchase agreement and credit and security agreement is approved. There's nothing else, we'll go to agenda item number 9.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
How come you always do that?
Motion by Tom,
I'll second.
second by Troy, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned.